Chapter 6, Sour Grapes. During those weeks before the time I confronted Nelson, and when I finally heard about his engagement, I permitted myself to fantasize about us. I chastised myself afterward for being a fool, even more foolish than Belinda, because she could fantasize and then forget and just fantasize about someone else, whereas I treated my broken dreams as if they were family heirlooms shattered beyond repair. I had actually anticipated a phone call from Nelson. I imagined that he had left our talk in my car believing that I was someone exceptional, someone so special he wanted to know me more, see and talk to me more. I was substantial. Surely someone as intelligent and ambitious as he was would realize the importance of having a wife who had my qualities. I envisioned him waking up one morning, slapping himself on the side of the head and saying, "What was I thinking? Here was Olivia Gordon all this time, unattached, attractive, and sensible. And I go having assignations in the dead of the night with her childish sister, risking my whole career, my reputation, my family reputation, and for what? Any minute, that phone in the office or at home would ring, and it would be Nelson asking if he and I could have dinner the night he returned from college. I would pretend to consider, then agree, and we would go out and have a wonderful time, discovering we really did have similar interests and ambitions. The date would grow into another and another, and in weeks, a few months at most, he would ask me to marry him. Belinda's wedding would be followed by announcements of my own engagement and impending nuptials. In days I would soar so high and so far past her, her head would spin. Finally, I would be rewarded for being the good daughter. Daddy's words about Nelson therefore resembled a clap of thunder in my head. A storm of no's and disbelief twirled in the angry clouds that swirled around my thoughts in a tempest of agony. The colonel just called to tell me Nelson's engaged to Louise Brannigan. Her grandfather was the state Supreme Court judge. It'll be in all the social columns next week, and they're planning on an engagement party the month after Belinda's wedding. I barely acknowledged Daddy. I simply stared at him, my blank expression masking my crushed heart. I guess I was way off the marking then. I might make a marriage between Nelson Childs and Belinda, huh? Yes, Daddy, I said, and I thought we were both well off the mark. I was worthless for the remainder of the day and during the days that followed. I moped around the house, hid from people, and especially avoided Belinda, who floated on her own laughter and smiles as if she were made of air and the rest of us were lumps of clay. She went on and on about the wonderful life she and Carson were gonna have, the home she would have him build, and the clothing and cars and the trips she had planned. I've decided that we should go to Bermuda for our honeymoon. We're going to stay at the most expensive hotel, too. I went to the travel agency and told him to find the best and not to be concerned about the cost. Just charge it to Carson McGill. I'll have to get used to saying that now, won't I, Olivia? She smiled. Just charge it, please. Charge it to Carson McGill. When you marry someone, Belinda, you care about him. You don't set out to bankrupt him or hurt him in any way. You and he are supposed to be together for better or for worse. You're supposed to look out for each other, I lectured. That's ridiculous. I shouldn't have to look out for him. He should always look out for me, protect me, provide for me. Want to do everything possible to make me happy, she retorted. And you do nothing to make him happy. If I'm happy, he'll be happy. If I'm sad, he'll be sad, she threatened. Carson's already learned that and accepted it. He knows if he wants me, he takes me as I am. And, dear sister, he wants me. Wants me very, very much. She giggled and whispered, I've been promising him the greatest honeymoon nights. Pleasure beyond his wildest imaginations. And you should see the way he drools. I swear, his tongue dangles like a dog sometimes. He treats every one of my kisses as if each was a jewel, so I deliberately don't kiss him very often. He thinks I'm terrified of sex. I shook my head and she grimaced. I won't be unhappy, Olivia, she insisted, pursing her lips. I'm doing all this, marrying Carson, because it's good for the family. But I don't have to be unhappy too, do I? Perish the thought, I said. In the beginning, I actually felt sorry for you, Belinda. I thought you might be doing something you really don't want to, but now I realize Carson's the one I should feel sorry for, not you. That's dreadful. What a dreadful thing to say, she smiled, her eyes twinkling in the moonlight. I hear the ding-dong of jealousy, she sang. That's not true. Ding-dong, ding-dong. Stop it. Well, stop trying to make me feel bad. Carson's very happy he has me. If you ask him today, he'll tell you he's the luckiest man in the world. He probably is. He's getting the woman of his dreams, she added, and went off believing her own propaganda. She was far from the woman of his dreams. It sickened me to think that all men were as gullible and blind as Carson McGill. But that's the way it looked to me now. Even Nelson Childs was beguiled by my sister. One Saturday afternoon, soon after Carson came calling on Belinda to take her on a shopping spree in Boston. She had already bragged to me of how much of his money she would spend and how she would insist he take her to one of the fanciest restaurants in the city. Then she would fall asleep in the car and leave him to drive her home like a chauffeur. And, she added with confidence, he's happy to do it. Daddy was fishing with some of his business associates, and Mother was upstairs in her room nursing another one of her bad stomach aches. They're coming more frequently lately. She blamed it on her own nervousness considering Belinda's wedding, and I believed her. Carmelita let Carson in and had him wait in the sitting room. I was in Daddy's den reviewing some of the bills he had asked me to check. I heard the doorbell and listened, then went back to my work. Moments later, however, I was surprised when Carson came in the den and looked in on me. Oh, sorry if I disturbed you, he said in a weak smile. I'm just waiting for Belinda. She's late, he added. As usual, I said. It's all right, Carson. Come in, please, I said, sitting back in Daddy's oversized leather chair. I'm sure I looked like Goldilocks sitting in Papa Bear's chair. This is a nice den and office. It has personality. I can see your father here. The room fits him like a glove, he muttered, his eyes darting about, avoiding mine. Why did my presence make him so nervous, I wondered. Is everything all right between you and Belinda? I asked directly. He turned sharply and nodded. Oh, yes, sure. It's just an exciting time for both of us. She so much wants to do the right thing, he added. Finally, I muttered. Pardon? Nothing. It's nice that you two are happy, I said, and pulled the chair up to the desk, intending to return to my work and end this silly chitter-chatter before it really had begun. Well, we have our little ups and downs, just as any couple would, but overall, I gazed up at him. He was having some last-minute stage fright, I thought. Maybe he wasn't as stupid as he appeared. Suddenly, I did feel sorry for him. My sister's lucky to have landed a catch like you, Carson. Oh, no, he said modestly, his face turning bright pink. I'm the lucky one. It's generous of you to say that, I said, considering her troubled past. What's that? He smiled with question marks in his eyes. Troubled past. He clutched his hat against his chest as if he were going to shield it to protect him from the slings and arrows I might throw his way. I smiled with bitter sweetness. Well, now that you're practically a member of our family, it's not wrong for you to be aware Belinda had problems. She was in finishing school, you know, but it didn't work out and we had to bring her home. Oh, that, yes, he said, with a look of relief. She told me all about that. Told you? Told you what? I said, sitting back with my fingertips pressed against each other. How she was wrongly accused of stealing some girl's jewelry in the dorm and how the other girls were all jealous and took the other girl's side. She couldn't continue living there under those circumstances, he declared with the firmness of a protector. Is that the fairy tale she devised? Excuse me? Belinda was expelled, Carson. You might as well know the truth. You're going to discover it anyway someday. Expelled for stealing? He said, nodding. No, not for stealing, I replied. He stared a moment, looked at the doorway, then sat. What was it then? Let's call it promiscuity, I said. His eyebrows nearly leaped off his face. Promiscuity? He paused, raising his level of courage so he could say the words. You mean of a sexual nature? I don't know any other, I said as sweetly as I could. But she learned her lesson from that. As well as other things, I said. You shouldn't be concerned now. What other things? Problems she had when she was in high school, I said as casually as I could. All girls have some. Did you? Nothing like the ones Belinda had, but Belinda's Belinda, I replied. What's that supposed to mean? We're all individuals, Carson. Some of us are more liberal with our bodies than others. Have greater appetites. It's what makes a horse race, right? Differences? You love her because she is who she is, don't you? I thought I knew who she was. Well, what do you two talk about if not each other's pasts? I asked, all innocence. I told her about myself, yes, but she never mentioned any promiscuity, as you say. Expelled for it? What sort of promiscuity? I mean, what did she do? You have to understand that she was so much less mature then, I said. It wasn't very long ago, he replied quickly. The events matured her, I said. Sometimes that happens when things are bigger than we expect. You mean there's something of a scandal? Almost. Daddy and I stopped it before it started, I bragged. He shook his head, his eyes grew glassy, numb. I had no idea. Who else knows this? Besides the family, administrators at the school, some of the girls, of course, and of course the boys involved, I said. Boys? You mean there was more than one? Oh, why talk about something a girl did when she was young and immature, Carson? That's not the girl you know right now, right? That's not the girl you proposed to, the girl you want to build a home for, the girl you want to have your children with. If she can still have children, of course. What? Why couldn't she? That's an entirely different matter, Carson. I don't feel right discussing it, even with Belinda's future husband. It's something that should be between you and your wife and your doctor, I added. I had no idea about any of this, he said, shaking his head. I don't put my ear to the walls surrounding gossip, and I know so few of Belinda's contemporaries, none of her girlfriends, in point of fact. You're not missing anything there, I said. Her friends are mostly undesirable. You won't want to have any of them to your home, much less at your wedding. His mouth dropped open. I'm sorry, I said. I promised my father I would review and correct these documents today, and... Oh, yes, he rose. We heard Belinda bouncing down the stairs. He looked at me with an expression of a man who was about to go to his doom. Carson McGill, she sang in the hallway. Where are you hiding? I know you wouldn't dare be late for a date with me, Carson. He stared out of the den as Belinda appeared to the doorway. There you are. Visiting with Olivia? How nice. We're on our way to Boston, Olivia. I know, you told me twice already, Belinda. Don't you get tired of doing men's work, she said with a little impish smile. It's not men's work, it's women's work. It's work, I said. The word that has never felt at home in Belinda's vocabulary. I explained to Carson, and he nodded. I don't want to make it comfortable in my vocabulary, she whined. Play, she followed. That's the word that would be the most valued guest in my house. Right, Carson, dear? He looked at her and then to me. We'd better be going, he announced. Have a nice time, both of you, I said. Carson nodded and started out of the room. Belinda's eyes grew small with suspicion for a moment, and then, whatever thought had flashed across her movie screen mind disappeared and was replaced with her usual fanfare. Thank you, Olivia, we will, she promised and spun quickly to shoot her hand under Carson's arm. I heard them leave the house and it grew quiet again. The small tight ball at the bottom of my stomach dissipated, and the waves of warm glee traveled to my heart, oozing satisfaction through my veins. Watching Carson's face shatter like some thin plastic mask felt good. Men should feel the brunt of their own stupidity. They should feel the heel of truth come down on their naked feet. I had no sense of guilt. If Carson couldn't accept Belinda for who she was, that was his problem, not mine. Someday he would come to see me and thank me for being honest, for being the only one who dared to open his eyes. Belinda would have to be honest with him. It's wrong for Daddy to keep all this buried. How would he like to buy a boat that had weak joints in its hull? How would he like it to discover the truth when he was already out to sea? Well, that's what it would be like for Carson McGill, wouldn't it? One day, months into their marriage, the truth about Belinda would reveal itself and Carson would feel like a man on a sinking vessel. It was better he went to sea knowing the dangers, the weaknesses in his little boat of love. For a while that afternoon, I felt like someone who had performed a great act of charity, who would criticize me for ensuring that my sister's marriage was based upon trust. Yes, I felt very good. I felt as if I struck a blow for every decent, sensible woman in America. And if men like Nelson Childs or Carson McGill didn't appreciate that, well, too bad. Someday they would. After I finished Daddy's bookkeeping, I had lunch and went out to read in the gazebo. It was a gloriously sunny day, with only pockets of milk-white clouds bursting here and there over the azure sky. The sea was calm, the sailboats looked dabbed by an artist's brush on the canvas of the Atlantic Ocean. There was a fresh, even delicious scent in the salt air. I really did appreciate and love our home. I could be in no better place. This is where I would make my life, find my own husband and raise my own family. I felt more confident about it, more sure of myself despite the recent events. Nature demonstrated itself all around me and taught the lesson that strong eventually win. It's only a matter of time. I hadn't been sitting there long, when, like a small bomb exploding, Belinda burst through the back door of the house, tears streaming down her cheeks, her hands raised as if she had puppet strings tied to her wrists. There you are, you traitor, you jealous, horrible sister. She charged over the lawn, her high heels catching in the grass and nearly tripping her. She pulled off her shoes and flung them angrily before continuing toward me. What is it, Belinda? Why are you back so soon? I asked calmly, lowering my book to my lap. She fumed for a moment, stammered, then took a hold of the railing. You told Carson about my being expelled from the finishing school, she accused, her right forefinger pointed at me like a knife. I could see she wanted to poke it right through my eye. I shrugged. He already knew you left the finishing school abruptly, I said, still in a controlled, soft voice. Yes, but he thought it was because I wanted to leave, because I had been accused of stealing someone's stupid costume jewelry. What? I didn't know that, Belinda. How am I supposed to keep track of all the lies you tell people? If you had a story you made up, you should have informed me so I could corroborate it if Carson asked. I thought you told him the truth, so I just... Just what? How could you tell him I was caught in bed with 2 boys? I didn't tell him that, I said, now speaking with a convincing assurance. After all, I hadn't. I never said you were caught in bed with anyone. You didn't, but he said... So I just thought, and then I told him. Oh, I told him too much too fast, she cried. Yes, I bet you did. You volunteered more information than you had to give him. But that's the danger in building a relationship on a floor of falsehoods, Belinda. You never know when you're going to step through it and trip yourself. He was so shocked, and he kept asking me questions about my high school life. I just thought some of the boys had spoken to him and told him lies, exaggerated. Bragged about making you pregnant, I asked. She looked at me. Yes, something like that. You mean you told him you were pregnant? Not exactly. He wanted to know about my having children. He never talked about children before, so I didn't know what he meant. He said maybe I couldn't have children, and I said of course I could. And he wanted to know how I was so positive, and I didn't say anything, but He's not as stupid as you hoped, is that it? I asked. She shook her head. I don't know. He got so angry at me, he just stopped the car, whipped it around, and drove me home. He said he had to go off by himself and think things over. She pouted, her arms across her breast. The nerve of him, she fumed. If he loves you as much as you think he does, a little misunderstanding won't matter, I said. She considered and raised her eyes to me. What should I do? What should I tell him? If he calls you and complains, you say take me as I am, or don't take me at all. That's what I would say. Yes, she agreed, nodding. I will. Imagine him turning around and taking me back home after promising to take me shopping and to dinner. What am I supposed to do with the rest of my day now? I'm all dressed, and I spent hours on my hair and makeup. Did you let him know that? No, I should have. I will, she said. I'm going to call him up and insist that he get back here, or else. It's a nice day, I said, gazing at the sea. If he doesn't come back, just come out here and read. Read? Read? I have things to buy. I wanted to get a new cape for my red velvet dress, she whined. I'll be here, I said, if you don't go off to Boston. She stared at me a moment, then biting down on her lower lip, her eyes blazing, she spun and marched back to the house. I looked toward the beach house, imagining if Carson got wind of that, I thought. He would probably drive around in circles for days. It brought a smile to my lips. I recalled a quotation I had recently read. A man falls in love with his eyes, a woman through her ears. Carson McGill was the best example of that, I concluded. Maybe one day I'd have the quotation embroidered on a pillow and send it to him so he could sleep with that wisdom under his head. Men, I thought disdainfully. I returned to my book, never more content with myself. Belinda fumed for the remainder of the day because Carson wasn't home to receive her irate phone call and didn't return her call until early in the evening. We had just finished dinner, eating under the atmosphere of a wake. Belinda sulked after ranting about how poorly Carson had treated her. Daddy's face was folded into a deep scowl, his eyes dark, his forehead wrinkled, and he brooded. Mom was still having a stomach trouble and ate a little, whispered in pain occasionally, and sat with her lips trembling most of the time. Belinda ate even less. Only I seemed to have a robust appetite. I tried holding some conversation by talking about the new book I was reading and what a beautiful day it had been. Well, it wasn't beautiful for me, Belinda reminded us. I spent most of it waiting around the telephone. I'm surprised at you, Belinda, I said. You never let a man run your life like this before. She glared at me for a moment, then blinked rapidly and nodded. You're right. Oh dear, Mother moaned. You're disturbing your mother, Daddy warned. It was more like a growl. Belinda returned to her sulking, and I ate quietly. As soon as dinner ended, Mother went up to her room, clutching her stomach. I thought she had a pale, pasty complexion. Why doesn't she see a doctor? I asked Daddy. He looked toward the door thoughtfully. She will. For the moment, I think it's just her nerves. This Belinda business, he added with a wave of his hand. Belinda had gone back to her room as well. What could have happened between them, he wondered. All I know is that they had some conversations about her past, Daddy. Carson wasn't happy about it, and she told him more than she had to, I guess. You knew he would eventually get to know some of her indiscretions. People don't keep their gossip under lock and key in Providence Town any more than they do anyplace else. He said. I didn't think any of that would matter once they were on their way to the altar, he muttered. Suddenly we heard Belinda coming down the stairs. Quickly, bouncing on the steps, she hurried to the door of the dining room to announce that Carson had finally called. Good, Daddy said. And? I asked, seeing a look of irritation in Belinda's eyes. He's just picking me up to talk, not to take me anywhere nice. He'll be here in 10 minutes, she replied. I hope he has earplugs because I intend to give him a piece of my mind first. Now don't say anything you'll regret later, Belinda, Daddy warned. A mature person thinks before she speaks. I know what a mature person does, Daddy. He doesn't turn around on the way to Boston and decide he can't take me where he promised he'd take me, and he doesn't fail to answer my phone calls all day, does he? I think I'm more mature. All I'm saying is keep in mind you two are going to be married soon. You have all life together. Don't try to spoil things now, Daddy advised. It's Carson who's spoiling things, she insisted. I couldn't contain a small smile, but I pressed my lips together so Daddy wouldn't see. Belinda could be pig-headed when she let her pride and her arrogance become her lead horses. In that respect, she wasn't unlike many people I knew, even Daddy. Belinda went to the bathroom to check her makeup. A little while later, Carson was at the door. However, Belinda did not permit him to enter. She greeted him herself and went outside with him, ordering him to drive off immediately. I went to the den to discuss the work I had done. Daddy seemed distracted and went to check on Mother. When he returned, he told me she was asleep and groaning. I don't like it, he said, shaking his head. She has no fever. It's not the stomach flu. Don't be a doctor, Daddy. Get her to 1 a.m. Yes, he said, you're right, Olivia. You're always right when it comes to doing sensible things. I wish Belinda had 1/10 of your good sense, he said, but I'm afraid she was born without any. Nearly half an hour later, the front door slammed, and we both looked up with surprise and anticipation. We heard Belinda charge up the stairs. What was that all about? I don't know, I said. I'll find out. Come right back and tell me everything she tells you, he said. I nodded and followed Belinda up the stairs to her room. She had her door closed. I knocked softly and opened it to find her sprawled on her stomach, her head hanging over the side of the bed. She wasn't crying as much as she was fuming. What happened? I asked. She turned to me and I saw a face a darker shade pink. Her lips were white in the corners. Her eyes were burning with rage. He says he can't marry me now. He says he spent the whole day thinking about it, and he had a discussion with his parents and they agree. That's where he was all day, talking to his mother and father instead of talking to me. He wants me to tell Daddy, and he'll pay for the expenses we might have incurred up to now. I threw my engagement ring out the window of the car. You what? I just opened the window and tossed it out while we were driving. That's where we've been most of the time. He was out on the road with his flashlight combing the brush in the dirt. He didn't find it, she said with satisfaction. He said he'll be back there in the morning. I hope he spends the rest of his life looking. How could you throw away a ring worth thousands of dollars? That he screamed. I laughed in his face. I said, how can you throw away a woman like me just because you heard some rumors and believe some stories? You would have been proud of me, Olivia. I told him he was wimpy and a wet noodle and a mama's boy, and that the only way he would ever get into bed with a woman is if he had some dark neighborhood and paid a prostitute, and then she might reject him anyway. You were right. He doesn't really love me. Not if he can do this to me. I told him he still owed me a shopping spree and a dinner in Boston, and I would send him that bill too. So the wedding's off, I said, nodding. Daddy's gonna be mad about the business, but I couldn't help it, Olivia. I'll explain it to him, I said. Would you please? Thank you, Olivia. I'm so lucky to have you as my big sister. You're wise. Thank you for your good advice, too, she said. Well, she continued without a beat, I guess I'll call some of my friends and let them know I'm free agent again, huh? Can't let the moss grow under my feet, she said, and went to the phone. I watched her for a moment before leaving to go down to Daddy. Other women might be heartbroken and cry all night, but Belinda behaved as though she'd simply lost the high school date. Daddy looked up from his desk as soon as I appeared in the hallway. Well, he said after I entered. Carson broke off the engagement. The wedding's off, Daddy. I was afraid of that, Daddy said as he sucked in his breath and held it for a moment. Your mother's going to be devastated. He told her he would gladly pay all the bills that you might have incurred. She threw his engagement ring out the window, I added quickly so he wouldn't wonder if there was a chance of reconsideration. She did what? Threw it out the window? Did they find it? No, I said. My God, that ring was worth $25,000, Olivia. McGill was bragging about it to me just the other day. That's Belinda, I said, and shrugged. She's a mad woman. We'll never find anyone for her now, not after this story gets out. Maybe not, Daddy, I said. Maybe we'll have to face the fact and do the best we can. Yes, he said, perhaps so. He stared down at his desk and then he raised his tired, sad eyes at me. Well, I guess I better put my mind and energy towards your well-being, Olivia. I'll have a better chance at success. I'll be fine, Daddy. I know you will. That's my consolation, he said. But I can't neglect you because she's a failure in every way and everything I try to arrange for her. He rose. I guess I'll have to go up and break the news to your mother. I might wait until the morning if she's still asleep, he said. You should probably anyway, Daddy. Give her a chance to get a good night's sleep. Yes, you're right, Olivia. He came and kissed me on the forehead. Good night and thanks for being my little general, he said. He was so distraught. I nearly shed some of those tears that were formed under my eyelids, but they stayed where they were. I watched him leave with his shoulders slumped and his head down. He was so depressed. Mother was sick upstairs. Belinda was chatting happily on the phone. And quiet, recovered from her dramatic breakup with Carson. In a day, it would be as if it never existed. Yes, I thought one of these days, perhaps years from now, Carson McGill would meet me. He would nod, maybe take off his hat and say thanks. I was sure of that as I was of tomorrow and the promises Daddy would make to me.